So just a quick review of the agenda. I'm going to start by providing an introduction to the OPC Wizard OPC UA Server SDK, briefly cover features, advantages, and benefits of the toolkit. Then Nicole is going to step in to demonstrate how easy it is to set up your development environment for the OPC Wizard toolkit, configure your server, and exchange data. After that, we'll wrap up with some additional housekeeping and closing remarks. And then, like Tanya said, we'll then go to answer some questions. So please feel free to enter them into the Q&A if anything comes to mind. All right, let's get started. So what is the OPC Wizard UA Server SDK? OPC Wizard is a software toolkit for rapid development of OPC UA or Unified Architecture servers. The aim of the toolkit is to allow users to develop a fully functional OPC UA server with very minimal code and programming effort by handling the intricacies of the OPC UA specification internally within the toolkit so that you don't have to. OPC Wizard offers .NET support in both C# and VB.NET and allows you to build custom OPC UA servers on both .NET Standard and .NET Framework. The toolkit's simplified read, write, and subscribe methods abstract that low-level OPC UA code into streamlined coding methods. There's rich documentation for the toolkit. There's over 60 code samples to help you get started fast. And the toolkit also includes a built-in administration dialog and some optional user prompts that, such as those for accepting certificates, that are customizable within your app, as well as support for automatic registration with the OPC UA local discovery server. And with the OPC Wizard SDK, you also have access to an experienced and reputable team, both here at Software Toolbox and in our development partner. If you're familiar with OPC Data Client and that toolkit, the same developer brings us OPC Wizard. So what are the advantages and benefits of these features? .NET support in C# and VB.NET provides compatibility with existing infrastructure as well as future-proof flexibility. A toolkit that's adaptable to .NET environments opens the door for eventual platform independence. The simplified read, write, and subscribe methods mean a steep reduction in learning curve and development time. I know both Nicole and I find it fun to read through the OPC UA specification sometimes, usually when we have a real head scratcher, but sometimes just because we don't have much else to do. But I know that's not true for everyone. Not everyone finds that fun and interesting, especially because there are thousands of pages of that specification. So you can skip having to read hundreds or, yes, sometimes even thousands of pages of UA specifications. And instead, you can build your application quickly using intuitive APIs, providing you with a fast and a lower cost to develop. Less engineering time, reduced development errors, lower support overhead, and royalty-free distribution allow you to get your OPC UA server features up and running quickly. And again, the experienced and reputable support and development teams means you can be assured that you're using a high-quality, professionally developed, and interoperability tested toolkit, backed by strong support for proven compliance and lessened risk. So, a little more about those benefits. That proven OPC compliance gives you compatibility with existing infrastructure and seamless integration with existing OPC UA clients and certainty of your software's quality and reliability. Non-commercial runtime-free licensing is available, allowing you to try the toolkit under non-commercial conditions without any licensing concerns. The toolkit also allows you to modernize legacy applications by adding OPC UA capabilities to existing .NET Core and .NET Framework applications without having to do any overhaul and just adding a couple of lines of code. So now that you know what the OPC Wizard UA Toolkit is and some of the benefits that it can offer, I'm going to have Nicole take over and show you it in action.
I have just started us off with a basic project. It's just a C# console app in Visual Studio 2022. And I have the framework set to .NET 8. This framework is currently supported in Windows, but we have had success with testing in Linux environments, so it is something that we are hopeful and looking to add support for in the future. So in our project, we want to start here with our dependencies. So the OPC Wizard dependencies have already been added in this case, but let's start by looking at those. There's two main ways I would recommend getting started. If you install OPC Wizard through the setup program, which you can download from our website called OPC Studio, you can run sample projects that are included with it, which already have everything pre-configured, as well as pre-compiled projects that you have available as demos. The OPC Studio installer also includes OPC Data Client, which is the OPC client toolkit, and that allows you to create custom OPC UA and OPC DA clients, as well as the Excel connector, which is another feature that you can download and play around with. The installer has quite a few other features that are pretty cool, so we'll take a look at some of those later. Alternatively, if you prefer to get your hands dirty and just get started in a project like this, you don't even necessarily need to download the installer to do so. The OPC Wizard assemblies are provided via NuGet packages, so you can add these packages in your Visual Studio project by right-clicking on your project and then going to Manage NuGet Packages. So in that interface, you should be able to install the OPC Wizard assemblies, the necessary package for you to start developing your server, just by referencing opclabs.opcwizard. So you can see here, I already have it installed, but you can also manage the version of the package from this interface. So if you're maintaining an existing server, you can continuously update it as new releases are put out. So with that said, we should be good to go here since we already have everything installed, and we can start by building our server out. There's a couple things that we'll need to look into to start, but it is quite quick and simple. So the great thing about this toolkit is it handles a lot of the underlying complexity of an OPC UA server for you, as Zach mentioned. So it only takes a few lines of code to set up something basic. We mainly need to create the server object, create the items to populate the server, and then start up the server. So those are our three main steps that we'll be looking into here. So let's start by instantiating our server object, and I'll just call it server. So we'll add some code here, and you can see I have my usings up at the top. These are just the references that I'll be using in this project, but we'll just start by creating that server object, as I said. The server component has a lot of basic defaults built in, so you can just jump in and get started with testing with some underlying security, like minimal security, so that you can build on top of that and configure it as you need without having to start with everything already set up and not necessarily know what minimal components are needed from the client perspective. So you should just be able to access this server on the default endpoint, which is using the port 48040. So I'm actually going to make a note in my console application for ease of reference. And this will just be our default endpoint, which is on the local machine. So So 48040. Okay. Cool. So the next thing that we'll want to do, as we said, instantiate our server object. We want to create the items to populate the server. So we will start with our first tag that is going to be inside of our server, which is just going to be a tag that we'll read. So I'm going to just be giving it some random values for us to simply access from the start. So I will just create my random variable here to be accessed later. And then now we want to create our tag in the server. So this will be using the object UA data variable, which we will attach to our server object. And then we will assign it some kind of operation that we want to occur whenever a client reads that tag. In this case, we want to update the value so that it reads a new value every time. So we'll do that using the server add function. And then we're going to add the UA data variable. And as you can see, as I'm typing out these commands that I'm building my server with, there's a lot of good documentation that's available even just through the IntelliSense, which can be used for just ensuring that you're on the right track. It has a lot of great notes that can make it a lot easier to ensure that you're building it out in a way that makes sense or that is expected within the design of the toolkit. So here I've got my data variable and I'll just call it data variable read. This is actually going to be so that's effectively all the definition of the tag needs, but we want to give it that random value. So we are going to assign the read function to a Lambda expression that tells the server, which is what we're pointing this tag into, that it should update the value of that tag anytime the read operation is called. So we'll use that read value function on the UA data variable object. And then from here, I'm just going to make my Lambda expression that updates random. Okay, so this is all we really need to define the tag. Now we just need to start the server, which we can do simply with the server start function. I'm going to want to keep the server running, so I'm putting in a read line, and then we'll be able to exit the console application when we hit enter. So I will make another note here for anybody who's accessing this console interface. And then all we need is the read line. And then we can stop our server. So this is our bare bones project with one tag where we should be able to access at this endpoint and read values from this tag. So I will go ahead and start this project and we should be able to see that. The installer of OPC Wizard, OPC Studio, includes the examples for OPC Wizard as well as the OPC Data Client Toolkit, which I will actually be using as my test client against the server. So you should be able to see the behavior from the client side and verify that the tag is up and available. So we can start the server now and confirm that this is running just through the console interface and then access it with our client. Forgive any slowness. The screen share has been a little bit hefty on my machine, so there we go. So we're up and running, and now I should be able to access through my client, which I have here. So I've already put in our server endpoint, and then our node ID for our data variable read. The namespace of 3 is the default. So this should be all we need to get good values. So if I hit read, we can see it's updating just fine. Good values are coming in. And if I hit subscribe, you should get those continuous updates on the subscription interval. So here we can see the values updating whenever we have that publish occurring, but I can also increase this to something like 500 milliseconds and it'll be updating just a little bit slower. So this is it for reading an item. That's all you really need. That's what makes the toolkit really nice and accessible for somebody who's just trying to get started. So I would definitely recommend if you do want to just jump in and start playing around with it, you should absolutely try something this simple and simply use what's within the toolkit itself. You can get started with your testing. But this is obviously only the read and subscribe operations. We also want to perform writes potentially from the client. So let's go ahead and do that. And we should be able to get that set up pretty equally simply. So we have our read variable. I'm going to create a second variable for our write. We can assign an entire function to the operations read or write. You can also just assign an action, like a singular action to it through a lambda expression, which is what we'll do for our write operation. You can also switch these so that it's a read value action. You don't have to set up an entire potential function with many commands if you choose not to. But with a function, you can do things like also assign a quality or a specific timestamp if you choose. So let's create our write operation. We will do a similar setup here where we're adding it to the server as a new data variable. And I will call this Add a variable write instead of read. And where we're performing our read value function, I will perform a write value action. So and here we want to, because it's a write, we want to make sure we're defining the data type for the specific write operation. And now we should be able to define our lambda expression that is being passed when this write operation is performed. So we're wanting to use that value as a parameter, and then whenever the write is performed, I'm going to print to the console just a notification of the value that was written. So that's what we will set up here. And I'll do it like this. Okay. So this should be, again, all we really need to define a right to an item here. So let's again see this in action. So let me start up our server. There we go. All right, so we've hit our server start because we saw that press enter to quit message come up. So now we should be able to access that server endpoint. And this time, instead of just simply inputting this item, we can actually browse the server and be able to pick out the specific tag that we just created. Any day now if you like to. There we go. Okay. So there's our write variable. And I will pull that tag in. And as you can see, it's got this this namespace URI, which it's prepended to the node ID. And the rest looks similar to what we had specified before. This, you can consider this implicit as like the base. The read item that we created is also inside of this NSU namespace URI. So either way, it should work for you. But we should be able to see if I read that item, it has a good value of 0. I should be able to subscribe, and it should continuously get any updates. So if I write something to it, we should be able to first confirm that the value updates in the client side, and then in the console we should get that event occurring where the write function or the write action that we defined will occur and print out our value. So we should get the value written to 5. We can see the value is 5 now, and I should be able to continuously change this and get updates. Nice. So that's basically the main components that you'd really need to build out your server. You may have noticed that the way we've set up our operations, right now they're tied to the client request, which isn't necessarily always the way you're going to want to build it out. So I do want to show one more example, just to show how you can decouple that. So right now, whenever the read occurs, we're updating the value. Sometimes the value of your tag might be updating in the background, and your client is separately being updated, perhaps not seeing all of the value updates if it's not necessarily relevant to it. But it is something that we can do here. So let me show you that. The way we're going to do that is, instead of updating this random value on the read of our tag, we are going to update it on a timer. So I will add a timer to my code. I'll just update it every second. And I want it to continuously reset. Okay. And then anytime the timer lapses or elapses, we want that value to update. And then we're going to assign that random value to the data variable, but we don't want the variable to be associated to the read operation, or the variable update to be associated to the read operation. So what I will do next is create my data variable, and we can stop this code here, but let me create my data variable. This time, instead of creating it implicitly in the server, I'll create it and then assign it to the server, so that we have a data variable object that we can then work with later with the timer. So let's do that. And we assign it to the server by the create in method, and then we'll put it in the server.objects folder, which is that default location. But you can also create your own folder structure as you need to organize your tags within the server that you're building. So I will call this just 2. Just to define it further here, I'll give it a specific data type. So I'll give it a value type of an integer. And then I want it to be read-only, which you can also define here, and this is a method. So I will set it to be read only by setting the writable method attribute to false. Okay, so we've got this data variable. We have a timer triggering every second. This item doesn't really have any value updates occurring on it because right now it's just existing in the server. So we can get the timer to be associated with the data variable through the elapsed event handler, using that data variable method, update read attribute data. So we're updating the attributes of the tag, just in this case, the attribute being the value of the tag, using the random value that we're generating on that timer elapsed call. So the way we can set this up is using that event handler. Just by assigning it to a lambda expression. And then now we'll use our data variable that we created, called our method to update the attribute data. And within that, we will update the value by putting in the random next function. So now this timer will be the one updating our data variable instead of the client call. Obviously, this is one way to update this value, but this could be any operation in your code that's running behind the scenes, that is just being invoked whenever some kind of asynchronous operation is being performed, and then you just use this method here, this update read attribute data, to update your OPC UA tag that clients can access as they need it. So let's go ahead and start this timer so that will start updating. And then that should be all we need there. So if we access that variable read to, we should be able to start seeing those items refresh on this specific timer interval rather than whenever a read performs. And let's see that happen. I'll go ahead and update the node that we're pointing to our read to. Looks like we're running. So if I perform a read, you can see we get good data. If I perform a read at the 200 millisecond interval, for our initial setup, the value was updating every 200 milliseconds. But now, if I do the subscribe, it will continue to only update on that timer. So it should still be on every second. And if I were to set that timer to something like 2 seconds, 5 seconds, we would only see these values update on that interval, regardless of what the client is subscribed at. This can go the other way, where if you specifically don't care about certain values within, if the value is changing a lot and you only care about every fourth or fifth value update, simply because that tag just generates a lot of information that you don't necessarily need access to, you can use this to slow down traffic and keep those updates from occurring so quickly, just regardless of how quick a client is subscribed to the tag. So that should be all we really need to get started with building out a server. Like I said, there is a lot more functionality that you can build out if you choose to. There's quite a few examples that install with the OPC Studio installer. Something you can use to start to navigate that is the launcher here, which is a nifty tool that it has, where you can see all of the different components that it provides you, including the samples that we discussed. I do have it pulled up here so you can get an idea. So let me show that. So there are quite a few examples provided in the installer that you can use to start to build out your own code, or just run these and get an idea of how it works, all the different operations. As you can see there, right now I have a licensing example pulled up, so you can use the runtime free license. You can use that inside of your code so that you don't need to expose the end user to the licensing at all. When you publish your application and deploy it into a production environment, the licensing is built into the application and you don't have to worry about it. There's lots of other things that you can play around here. So one of the other things I do want to show you is the OPC command tool, which is a command line utility you can use to quickly spin up test servers that you might want to test against, and just see the different functionality. It's really nice because it has the logging, the server monitor logging built into the tool. So it also uses the OPC Wizard Toolkit under the hood, and you can use this as a good comparison point. So right now I do have this server running, and I have a client connected. So we'll actually peek at this in a moment. So it's reporting on that information and showing you exactly what's happening. And that's a really good way to be testing, or just to see the different functionality of the server. The final thing I do want to highlight for you is the Connectivity Explorer. This is a interface that you can use to preview the values similar to like a test client, and verify functionality of any clients you're building out. It's also really nice because with the GDS integration, the global discovery server integration that the OPC Wizard Toolkit provides, this is a good way to test against that. So if you have any kind of troubleshooting you need to do, this is a good way to do it. As you can see, there's a few operations here. You can ping the machine that the server is running on, try a TCP connection to the port, and determine what kind of issue you might be running into with your your test server or with whatever component you have running in production even, should you need an external component. So yeah, that should be about it from my demonstration. I hope this was a good highlight for you. There's definitely many more tools that you can leverage in the toolkit. Like I said, there's plenty of examples both in the application that you can build out from your different examples that the installer comes with. There's also lots of examples in the documentation here. So these are a good place to start as well. But should you have any questions, we're happy to help. So definitely reach out to support at Software Toolbox if that's something that interests you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Nicole. There were a few questions. One I was able to answer because that's the most basic one. Is there a trial version available? Yes, you will get a link to the trial download. In addition to that, could you, Nicole, or Zach, just quickly point out the limitations of the free trial?
So the trial allows you to run any application for 30 minutes at a time before you'll need to restart it to continue the functionality. If you need a little bit more for your testing, that's absolutely possible. We can provide temporary licenses that will allow you to extend that time. So it'll function for the however long you need within that temporary license period. So beyond that, there's not any real limitations with the actual operation of the server. There are different licensing levels, which will potentially be something that we need to discuss in terms of the needs of the server, so we can make sure that that's getting addressed. But just for testing, you'll be able to have the full functionality, and then in period, if you do need to work around it, just let us know and we can get you that temp.
Excellent. I'm sure nobody will complain if we just cover some more questions. I know we're running over a few minutes. What support is available for debugging and troubleshooting is another question that was asked.
Yeah, so like Nicole pointed out, we do have the documentation. There's a lot of information in there about how things are, each method's supposed to work and kind of what can go wrong with them, and what you're supposed to do. And then if you run into any issues, you don't have, you kind of can't figure it out. If it's something one-off, a single error or a specific error, you can reach out to the support team, support@softwaretoolbox.com. Or if this is something where it's a bigger question of the integration into your existing software, or with other software, our solutions team would be equipped to help with that. And that is solutions@softwaretoolbox.com. But either way, to get to either of our teams, you can call 704-849-2773. And I'll put that up on the screen at the end.
Speaking of integration, is it possible to integrate OPC Wizard Server into a larger architecture with cloud or edge components?
I would definitely want to get further context on the specifics of the environment before we would make a recommendation for a specific setup, but it is absolutely possible. A lot of the benefits of using a toolkit like this is the developer is very forward focused. We have a good relationship with them, and they are always making sure that new technologies as they're coming out, gauging interest in them and making sure that they're supported with the product as we move forward. So this is, as a toolkit, it does have support for both .NET and COM development environments. So there is some flexibility there. Like I said, there's the potential for Linux environments in the future that we're seeing as a possibility. And then at that point, the limitation is your imagination, and obviously ours too, because we'll help you out.
Yeah, and even for things that the toolkit doesn't currently cover, because it's a toolkit, you can integrate it with other toolkits and what you already have existing. So if you have a pre-existing application with, say, an MQTT toolkit already built in, you can add the UA server functionality on using this. So if it's that kind of thing that you're looking to do, that's kind of the big benefit of using a toolkit, because it's building blocks.
Yeah, and there's PubSub support currently, so MQTT is something that you can leverage should you have some kind of need for that at the moment.
Thank you.